Hello, 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 and welcome to Dr. Hood, helping others overcome determinants. Today we're going to talk about common essential documents and clinical research concepts, ALCOA plus principles. Some of you may be familiar with the principles, some of you may not be. So this is a good opportunity to get an introduction or a refresher. ALCOA plus principles. So you have these principles related to documentation. And we want to make sure that we follow these principles because it keeps everything aligned. So, what does the A stand for? The first A, we have attributable. We want to know the data should be traceable back to the person who recorded it. So, if you are writing your source documentation at the end of that visit, you want to have a place where that study coordinator and or that principal investigator or that sub investigator has a place to sign or initial and date. So that visit can be attributable to their documentation. If you have an electronic way to document visits, that CTMS system needs to have what we call be FDA compliant, 21 compliant, CRF 21 compliant. And that states that whoever writes or documents in that system, their username in real time is going to be stamped to that documentation. So again, that data should be traceable back to the person who is putting that information in the system or writing it down. We want to make sure that that information is legible. So we want to make sure that the handwriting is written in such a way that anybody that comes to read it can understand what it says. Now, oftentimes signatures may not be legible, but that's when you may go back to that delegation log, because that delegation log is going to have the printed version of that individual next to their signature. So it allows you to know who that signature is related to. Then we want contemporaneous. Data should be recorded at the time of the activity. So if we are doing vital signs or drawing blood or administering medication or we conducted a phone call, those tasks we need to date and time while we are doing them. The reason being, you may forget something. You may, what did I draw that blood at 11:50 or 11:51? Did I see that patient at 8 o'clock on the dot because that's when their appointment was, or were they late? So we don't want to try to remember what happened. We want to document time in real time. Again, if you are using electronic documentation work area, it should be programmed in such a way that the data is collected in real time. If you do paper charting, you want to write down that time in real time. And then we have what's called original. The first recorded data should be preserved. So should you jot down something related to the patient on a sticky note and then transcribe it to your paper CRFs, you need to take that sticky note to that CRF, because technically that is the original documentation of that data. And it can happen. It can happen often. You can forget a piece of paper or forget the first page, but the patient is in the room and you don't want to forget, so you flip over your second page and you jot down what should be recorded on that first page. We don't want to get rid of that first page. We want to keep that first page. Um, I remember misfortune, what happened to one of my members at one of the sites. This individual charted on a paper chart, and that version was outdated. And she was new to research, so she didn't understand. It wasn't a study that I was working with, but I overheard what happened. So she didn't understand that she still should have kept that original documentation, even though it was outdated. That version of that CRF was outdated, or that source doc was outdated. So she transcribed all the information to the new version. And I think the last section was what was added. It may have been a comment section. It may have been, again, I wasn't on this study, so I don't know the details, but what I do know, that she had shredded that original documentation, and she was reprimanded for that. So it is very important that the original documentation is preserved with that subject's chart. We don't want to, even if something gets on the paper, you so happen to spill a drink or food or something, you want to let it dry. You might want to put it in a report cover, so it's in a clear cover, so no one else can touch that stickiness or that contamination or whatever it might be. But it still should be filed with that original chart. We want to make sure that it's accurate. Now, this is where the concept of ALCOA is very important, because sometimes we do document things incorrectly. We might transcribe a number. We might um, incorrectly. It should have been 15 and we put 51, or vice versa. And we have that, maybe that original IRT confirmation that tells you what kit the patient should have received, but for whatever reason, when you transcribed it to your source, you flipped the number. It is okay in that instance to draw one straight line, initial and date, and put the correct information. So mistakes will happen, but we want to make sure that we document things as accurate as possible. But should we make a transcription error, or should a patient provide us with some medication, because this can happen also, we collect a verbal documentation of a patient's medical history or a patient's ConMeds, and they tell us the dose incorrect verbally, but once we get those medical records, we see what the accurate dose is. So technically, we did not document initially accurately, because we were provided the correct information. So again, we draw one line through, so the original information still can be seen, and we make the correction. And I would say, if it's related to a ConMed or a medical record indication, we need to probably put in the comment section why we update it. So it would be good clinical practice to say, patient reported incorrectly, medical records confirm the dose is, and then you indicate what the correct dosage is. We want to make sure data is complete. This is very, very, very important. We don't want to leave blank sections on the CRFs or in progress notes or on the lab requisitions when it's not applicable to be blank. If the lab requisition is asking for the date of birth, year, collection time, collection date. And sometimes they ask for maybe the time it was placed in a freezer. Whatever the case may be, we need to make sure every applicable field is complete. Anything that's not applicable, we need to draw that diagonal line. We need to initial and date, and we need to indicate NA. Or if they already have a box that indicates NA, we need to make sure that box is checked. Typically, when a CRA comes to sites and we're looking for completeness, oftentimes what's missing may be the subject ID. The CRFs, as it relates to paper, may have 5 pages, and on one of those pages, the study coordinator forgot to place the date, or maybe even the page number. So at the end, we want to make sure all paginations are closed out. We want to show completeness. Consistent. Data entry should follow a logical and traceable order, often with timestamps. So if the patient has 5 subsequent visits, we want to make sure those visits are placed in the chart the same way. So some sites may do descending, where they will keep the first visit at the back and subsequent visits will be filed in front, and they may be ascending, which is the opposite. So that first visit will still be in front, and they may file subsequent visits in the back. Hope I didn't say that backwards, but you get what I'm trying to say. But so we want to make sure if we have the informed consent in the first tab, we have the visits in the visits in the middle, we have the ComEd in the medical history right after that, and then we have the labs in the back. We want to make sure that's consistent for every subject chart that is presented to be reviewed. We don't want one study coordinator filing one way and one study coordinator filing another way. The same with the regulatory. If the standard is set that GCP is documented every 3 years, we want to make sure that standard is for everybody. If the CV is every 1 year or every 2 years, whatever the standard is, we want to make sure that it's consistent across the board. Enduring, this is one of those plus. Data should be stored securely for a long-term use. So we know after a study is closed, the expectation that it remains on site between 1 or 2 years, whatever the agreed upon time period is, and then it's sent off to long-term storage and it is secure. So if for whatever reason something happens and that information is destroyed, a fire, flooding, whatever the case may be, it's the site's responsibility to notify the sponsor of that CRO immediately, so they can figure out what needs to be done from that point on. And it needs to be available. Data should be accessible when needed, included for review and audits. So as a CRA, we do instrument visits. When we come to the site, it should be an expectation that the charts are ready for us. Sometimes, however, you would get to a site, and even though the visits occurred from the last time you were there until this point, this study coordinator or the data person has not entered that information into EDC, so they do not provide you with the charts. So you have to hopefully encourage your sites to make sure that they chart upon the agreeable expectation, whereas that's within 3 days of the visit or 5 days of the visit, and answer queries within, whatever the required time frame is as well. So again, we have attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, accurate, complete, consistent, enduring, available. And when I first started research, we did not have the plus. And now we have the plus. That was in 2011. So just to goes to show you that once again, clinical research is ever changing. So you can follow me on my social media platforms. I am on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. And if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to email me at drhoodresearch@gmail.com. Thanks for watching.